If you watch movies, like ever, you must have noticed that recently we've been living in a state of cinema that relies heavily on franchises. This phenomenon started in the early 2000s but only grew bigger as the years went by, and now it feels like it's the only thing we see in theaters. The list of the 10 highest grossing movies of the last 10 years is almost exclusively composed by franchise entries, and that's not the studio's fault. People watch these movies and most of them deserve the attention. I could spend a few minutes talking about how the Harry Potter movies started the big young adult fantasy craze of the 2000s, but that didn't last long and I'm more interested in a different direction for this. You see, this video is about the big plan, and these movies based on famous novels like Divergent, Maze Runner, Hunger Games and Harry Potter itself are big franchises. Or try to be, but they're not as much into the big plan thing. My point in this is the cases where a studio or a set of writers or producers want everyone to believe they know exactly what they are doing and everything is connected, cause God forbid we just make one good movie and call it a day. I wanna start addressing the situation from the beginning. There is one name you can all point our fingers at and pledge guilty, and this name is Marvel, or Marvel Studios, or MCU, or Kevin Feige if you will. Point is, all of this is their fault, because Marvel had a plan and it was good. And spoiler alert for like the whole MCU. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU for the closest friends, is the most successful movie franchise in the history of cinema. Looking back, it's insane to think how much of an event all of this actually was. Starting in 2008 with the release of the first Iron Man movie, everyone was caught off guard by a movie about a pretty unknown and kinda disliked character and starring a very controversial actor. In the early 2000s, neither Iron Man or Robert Downey Jr. were what they are today. The Iron Man was kind of a B-tier type of character, popular enough to have its own solo series of comics, but not as much popular as Spider-Man or X-Men for people who didn't know the comics to know who he was. And his personality was a bit different as well. Not as much people liked him because he was basically what we know from the movies, especially the first one, but only the bad parts. Plus he was an alcoholic. And our beloved RDJ was, ironically, in a very similar path. He was arrested a couple of times in the late 90s and the early 2000s, mostly because of substance abuse. He spent a lot of time in rehab, and after that he was trying to find his way back into business. He had his fair share of success, he was always a great actor, but he wasn't getting any really big parts, let alone a blockbuster kind of thing. But in 2008 he was cast as Tony Stark. Besides all of that, superhero movies were not in very good shape. The 90s were not so kind to them, so people had a very specific view on this kind of movie, and no one had any idea how much of a success this movie was going to be. And Marvel wasn't even going to choose Iron Man to kickstart the MCU. The plan was to make only one movie, and based on its success, continue to produce more stories about the Marvel comics leading to the Avengers. Originally, they wanted to do the Captain America movie first, but since they really needed this movie to be a success, before any decision was made, the producers conducted a market research. They brought a few groups of kids and showed them pictures of the heroes they intended to adapt to the movies, explained them their powers and told them a little bit about the story of each one. Then they asked the children which hero they would like to play with as a toy, and all of the groups chose Iron Man. So they decided to set Captain America aside and start with the genius, billionaire, playboy philanthropist. No one expected an Iron Man movie to be that much good. The movie had a budget of $140 million, grossing almost $600 million worldwide. And when your movie makes more than 4 times the money you spent to make it, it's an obvious green light for the rest of the plan. So they put everything in motion, with the Hulk still in 2008, Iron Man 2 in 2010, Thor and Captain America in 2011, and finally the Avengers in 2012. The only movie of Phase 1 that wasn't a success was The Incredible Hulk. It actually kinda lost some money, but thank God Marvel understood what was the problem with this movie, recast Bruce Banner and just forgot about the rest. Iron Man 2 was also poorly received by audiences despite the financial success, but that was good because this made Marvel realize what they had to change in order for the plan to work. You see, the first 3 movies followed what we know today as a classic superhero format, an action-adventure movie with powers. But after the Hulk and Iron Man 2 situations, Marvel had to take a turn in their creative direction. They understood that people were getting tired of the same movie format that felt like watching the same movie over and over again. The plan was just at the beginning, they had some space to be creative, so they started exploring other genres. Captain America: The First Avenger was supposed to take place in the 40s for about half of the movie, and the other half in modern days. But after a lot of rewriting, they decided to turn it into a World War II movie. It's Saving Private Ryan, but with Captain America. And it worked! The movie is good, was very well received, and made a lot of money for the studio. The execution of this plan was almost perfect, introducing all of the main heroes one by one, with movies that work on their own but connect at some point to get to the climax, the Avengers. The first movie event we had in this superheroes era, and the first Marvel movie to make over $1 billion on the box office. What a success. The plan worked, so why stop here? They continued to increase the universe with Phase 2 releasing Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, and Ant-Man. If you take a look at these entries, you'll notice that most of them are doing the same thing from before, exploring different genres. Iron Man 3 and Thor the Dark World are the ones that people like the least, and not for nothing are the ones that don't explore new genres very much. And also they kinda suck. But the other ones are very good. The second Avengers is pretty forgettable, but it's a nice crossover superhero movie, and bringing everyone together is the best way to finish the phases. What? Age of Ultron is not the last movie of Phase 2? Oh yeah, right, this guy. I'll be right back with you, buddy, don't worry. Let's pretend they ended the phase in an Avengers movie, because, you know, all the build-up is for the Avengers, and then the phase is over, alright? Alright, good. Guardians of the Galaxy is awesome. It's basically a pirate movie, but in space, and people with superpowers, and a raccoon who's best friends with a tree. A group of weird misfits come together to do some shenanigans in this galaxy or in a galaxy far, far away. Wait a second. Nah, screw it, I like Guardians of the Galaxy better than Star Wars, don't judge me. Let's get back to this little man. One of my favorite Marvel movies. Ant-Man is a heist comedy and it's so much fun. Some people don't like this movie very much, maybe it's because it's kinda goofy, or maybe the movie in fact isn't perfect, but I don't mind, I love it. And I love Paul Rudd, he's the best. Also a big shout out for him and Chris Pratt for getting ripped to be superheroes. Marvel's big plan was designed to take us to a very specific point in the story, the Infinity Stones and Thanos. He first showed up in the post-credit scene of the first Avengers, and the Tesseract, which is later revealed to be the Space Stone, is very important in Captain America. Loki's scepter is also later revealed to be an Infinity Stone, so all of this was always part of the plan. But Phase 2 started taking the MCU into a more clear direction. Thor 2 introduced the Reality Stone, Thanos decided to take the matters to his own hands in the end of Age of Ultron, and Guardians of the Galaxy finally explained the Infinity Stones. So now everyone that knows a little bit from the comics is freaking out about what is to come next. Phase 3 begins with Captain America Civil War breaking the Avengers apart, and if you're not Team Cap, you're my enemy. Doctor Strange, which is another not so good movie that I love, brings another Infinity Stone to the table. Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is amazing, again. Thor Ragnarok explodes the Mjolnir, cracks some jokes and shows Hulk's butt. Black Panther introduces us to Wakanda and the Vibranian stuff. The Black Panther mythology is so captivating, I adore this part of this universe. And also we finally have Spider-Man, woohoo! He shows up a little bit in Civil War and gets not one, but 2 movies in this phase. Spider-Man Homecoming is a delight. I got everything I wanted to see in a Spider-Man movie. He's a neighborhood hero who saves normal people from normal threats. It's a small-scale, intimate, comfy movie. And the second movie is kinda misplaced because thematically the movie fits better in the multiverse saga, and again, it was released after the last Avengers that should be ending the phase. Phase 1 is the only one that actually ends in an Avengers movie? Why isn't anyone listening to me here? Anyways, the third phase of the MCU builds up to the big event everyone was waiting for, Avengers Infinity War. I still remember every detail of this moment of my life. I was so hyped for this movie, everyone making theories about what would happen and where would be the Soul Stone. My entire existence on the internet was about Marvel and the Avengers. And then we got the movie and oh my god, I was not disappointed, it was perfection. 10 years of build-up finally paying off, the plan worked guys, yes! We will never, and I repeat, never have another Infinity War type of thing happening again. It was a historical landmark for cinema. The first Marvel movie to join the $2 billion club. I mean, it was the first time in my life that I watched the same movie more than once in theaters. I always liked rewatching movies, but Infinity War was the first one that I actually paid for more than one ticket. And it's safe to say that we all remember how it felt to once again hear the words, "There was an idea." And that's not for nothing, cause the movie is so good, and my favorite part, the heroes lose. And there is no post-credit scene, no movies happening after that, just utter silence for a whole year. Marvel still released Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel between Infinity War and Endgame, but both these movies take place before the events of Infinity War, so we really didn't know what would happen next. Now imagine if they didn't even tell anyone that there was going to be a second movie. We would go to the theaters expecting to see the end of this story, and in the end of the movie, they lose? Everyone would be like, what just happened? And after the credits rolled, we would see the announcement for the next movie 1 year after that. It would be an even bigger event, like the boldest move ever. I really miss this era of superhero movies. The anticipation, the theories. For a certain period, life was about these movies. I planned everything I had to do in order to be at the movie theater when the next MCU entry comes out. And later I could discuss it all with my friends at school, which is another great thing about these times that my generation experienced. If you were, for example, 25 years old in 2008, this time period doesn't seem that much because you went from being an adult in Iron Man to being an older adult in Endgame. But I grew up with these movies, they got me through puberty. So there's an extra dash of nostalgia in this whole story that will never leave the back of my head. But point is, the plan for the Infinity Saga was perfect. All three phases had a clear purpose. Phase 1 was introduction, origin stories for the heroes and their place in the world. Phase 2 was team building, the heroes learning how to be a family while being confronted with their own flaws and forced to grow up as characters. Phase 3 was about conflict and climax, everything pointing to the inevitable threat that was coming. It all had meaning, the movies connected perfectly, and the story is wrapped up masterfully, because a good plan is only as good as its conclusion. Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame are a two-part finale to 11 years of history. The closing chapter for the big plan Marvel had for the universe they created. In the original plan, that movie was supposed to be Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2, but they realized that this two-part final movie thing was never a good idea and people never liked it, only tolerated it for a while, so they've came to their senses and changed this detail about the plan. But the ending was always planned to be 2 movies, so it was just a title technicality. It's not like Harry Potter or Hunger Games where they had a big book to adapt and decided to split the story in 2 so they could make one very slow movie and save all of the interesting stuff for the second part. Anyways, Endgame was not as good as Infinity War, but it definitely is a worth ending for the saga. And of course, it was an event even bigger than Infinity War. Just so you have an idea, it hit $1 billion in the box office in 5 days, and the $2 billion mark was achieved in only 11 days. It's the world record for the fastest movie to ever make $2 billion and the second highest grossing film of all time. People are very much used to being disappointed with how stories end. We have some severe cases like How I Met Your Mother, Game of Thrones and Stranger Things, but 7 years later this film still holds up pretty well. Avengers Endgame was almost perfect, and that's a big problem, because when you have a beautiful plan like that and you wrap it up with a little bow, what do you do next? What story is left to be told moving forward? And the answer is none. Marvel planned something really great, created a universe, introduced the most lovable heroes, told a story, and ended it. They really committed to putting the end in Endgame. The movie doesn't set up anything for the future of the universe, it doesn't even have a post-credit scene, and the things that were left in the air got really messy from this point on. That's because this movie was dedicated to completing the characters' arcs. The main heroes are the 6 original Avengers, right? Iron Man is dead. Black Widow is dead. Captain America is metaphorically dead. His story was finished. Thor went out to space with the Guardians after finding purpose in life. Hawkeye went home to his family, and Hulk finally found out his reason for existing, which also represents closure to their journeys. But what about Sam getting the shield from Steve? What about the Guardians going after Gamora? What about the Loki variant escaping? What about Wanda mourning Vision? Well, not all characters are dead, they're still around doing stuff. You can't just pretend they won't do anything more to their lives just because the story is over. Showing the audience a blink of the future is not necessarily setting up, and here lies another problem. Remember what I just said about the phases having purpose? The next phases kinda don't. Phase 1 was introduction, phase 2 was team building, and phase 3 was preparation and conflict. But what are phases 4 and 5 even about? In WandaVision we see Wanda becoming the Scarlet Witch, and in Falcon and the Winter Soldier we see Sam becoming Captain America. So phase 4 is about the heroes we just lost and how the world is adjusting to their absence. But then in Loki we see how the multiverse was created when a Loki variant killed a Kang variant. And in Shang-Chi Shang-Chi, we see the terrorist organization from the first Iron Man and a teaser for the next Avengers. Okay, so this phase is actually about setting up the multiverse and reuniting the next formation of the Avengers? But then we got Black Widow, a prequel movie that doesn't even connect to the rest of the multiverse besides kinda setting up the Thunderbolts. Eternals, which is a very nothing movie that shouldn't even be in the MCU. Spider-Man No Way Home, a film that only used the multiverse to do fan service. Moon Knight, a show about a character that was never mentioned by anyone in the MCU at all and never mentions the MCU at all. Hawkeye, which is just a very cozy and fun Christmas special. Wanda the movie, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Bad Writing, the worst movie of Christian Bale's career, and whatever the hell this is supposed to be. They started coming up with problems out of nowhere just to solve them, and sometimes problems that already have been solved previously. In Endgame, Sam understands why Steve is passing him the shield and accepts the mantle of Captain America, and Wanda conforms with Vision's death and finds peace. But in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Sam goes through a journey of understanding why Steve passed him the shield and accepting the mantle of Captain America. And in WandaVision, about 3 weeks after the events of Endgame, Wanda is mourning Vision so bad she enslaves an entire town only to leave her fanfiction with him. You see how Phase 4 is all over the place, and Phase 5 is no different. The only good entries were Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is simply amazing as always, and Deadpool and Wolverine, which is more of a joke than an MCU entry as we all expect from a Deadpool movie. Loki Season 2 is wonderful, Daredevil, Born Again and Agatha All Along are all good shows, but besides that, does anyone even care about the other Phase 5 projects? And again, what is this phase even about? Quantumania was so bad and so poorly received that Marvel decided to give up on Kang entirely. And don't tell me they made that decision because of the Jonathan Majors problem, because they could just choose another actor to play Kang. We are in the multiverse saga, they wouldn't even need to come up with an explanation. Just say it's another variant. It would be the easiest recast ever. But that's not the case. Instead, Marvel realized that this story was going nowhere and people were getting kinda mad. So they decided to pull out of their pockets a Fantastic Four villain to be the next big threat to the Avengers. A character that was never mentioned, never showed up before, and therefore had zero build up until this point. But they cast Robert Downey Jr. to play it and are even bringing back Steve Rogers to this, because if the audience sees some familiar faces, maybe they'll wanna watch the movie. I got carried away. What is this video about again? Oh yeah, the big plan. Marvel's plan worked until Phase 3 because they actually had a plan. But after that, they fell into the problems they created for themselves. The universe got way too big and the story is now too convoluted for its own good. But everything was already big and complicated in the Infinity Saga, so if they wanted to double down on that, maybe they needed to do the same thing they did in the beginning of the MCU. Take a step back and plan. I believe that after Endgame they should have taken a few years of hiatus to plan the next steps, have a clear idea of what the next phases were supposed to be, lay down the groundwork and kinda restart the MCU slowly with a new saga. Use the experience from the previous 11 years and see what works and what the audience will dig. But they did the exact opposite, started creating more and more content, quantity over quality. They released 7 movies, 8 TV shows and 2 holiday specials in 2 years. That's over 50 hours of content only on Phase 4, which is bigger than the first 3 phases combined. Everyone got sick of it pretty fast. Shocker. It got to a point where you had to watch like 20 movies and a dozen TV shows just to understand the next film coming out. However, if everything is bad and it all comes out at the same time, there is no time to watch it all because everyone has better things to do and no one actually wants to watch it all because it's all half-assed and everyone has better things to watch. Thank God they decided to slow down in Phases 5 and 6, but too little too late. The MCU was already a universe that is just not worth following anymore. We all remember the glory days fondly. Even after the MCU became a fiasco, we still think about the emotion those movies brought to life on us. And we are not the only ones who remember that, because that phenomenon that was the Infinity Saga of the MCU started something I like to call the cinematic universe epidemic. Everyone saw Marvel Studios swimming in money and decided that they also wanted to have their own big plan. And no one seems to know how to do it. Warner Brothers is the most obvious victim of the big plan disease. Marvel and DC are the 2 biggest comic book publishers. They have the most famous characters and are the reference when it comes to superhero stories. Also, their rivalry goes way back. They fight for dominance in the comic book industry since the 60s. So it's obvious to say that when Marvel brought their heroes to life in the big screen, DC wanted to do their own version of that. They already had the Dark Knight trilogy going on for a while, but Nolan's approach to the story was never meant to start a franchise. It was more of a grounded, self-contained take on the Batman character. But in 2013 they handed the steering wheel to Zack Snyder and kickstarted the DC Extended Universe with Man of Steel. Despite having a way darker tone than the Superman story should have, it was actually a good way to start. The movie was good, people liked it made money, everything according to the plan. And they immediately screwed up. The next entry in the DCU was Batman vs Superman, which is a messy movie for a number of reasons, but I want to focus on the parts that messed with the big plan. We just took a good look at Marvel's plan and what made it work. The format exists for a reason, and even though people got kinda tired of the superhero subgenre, the way Marvel did it was the one that works. First, you have to introduce the characters, not necessarily making origin stories, but showing their place in your universe. Then you develop them, make them grow into something more interesting, and when we know the story and know the heroes, you finally bring them all together. The DCU tried to skip all of that process. They introduced Superman and Man of Steel and went straight to a crossover with Batman, Wonder Woman, Lex Luthor, and a bunch of references to other heroes we haven't even heard about in this universe yet. Still in that dark tone Zack Snyder loves so much, they thought that putting two heroes against each other would be an original idea that could bring people to the theaters. And it did, but we still have to deal with the problems in the plan. We didn't spend enough time with these characters for this crossover to make sense. I believe they assumed people would be excited to see those well-known heroes together and didn't want to waste any more time. But here's the thing, those are not well-known heroes. I mean, everyone knows Batman and Wonder Woman, but until this point, we didn't know this Batman and this Wonder Woman. It's a completely different take on the characters, a new version with new actors and a new director, everything is different. And Man of Steel was just enough proof of that. Well, maybe if the movie didn't suck that much, we wouldn't care to get to know the characters after the crossover. The next movie they made for this universe was the first Suicide Squad, which I guess it was supposed to be DC's Guardians of the Galaxy, a group of misfits come together for a greater purpose, becoming friends and so on. But as soon as they saw the poor reception the Dark Snyder tone was getting, they started rewriting, reshooting, and most importantly re-editing and changed the whole marketing campaign of the film. Upon trying to change directions, they ended up turning the Suicide Squad into a bunch of music videos back to back. It's not a movie, it's a 2-hour long collection of scenes. After that we got Wonder Woman, which is not bad at all, but then we got another crossover. Guys, come on, did you learn nothing? Aquaman is a good movie, Shazam is one of the okayest movies I've ever seen, and Birds of Prey got a very confusing reception. Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn is iconic, undeniably, so they thought her solo movie was gonna be a hit. But there is no time to think about that because in 2020, the COVID pandemic shut down everything and stopped most of productions, leading to Wonder Woman 1984 being released directly on HBO Max, and what the hell was that movie? The original Justice League was bad, the Snyder Cut is bad but longer.
Kal-El, no!
The new Suicide Squad is really fun but kinda don't fit in with the rest, and from here everything went downhill. Black Adam, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, The Flash, Blue Beetle, one debacle after the other. People say Aquaman The Lost Kingdom was good, I didn't watch it, but the universe was already doomed beyond repair, so it doesn't matter. This sequence of epic failures only showed everyone that the DCEU had absolutely no plan at all, and that led Warner Brothers to make some drastic changes. They hired James Gunn and Peter Safran to be co-CEOs of the DC Universe. The DCEU is officially dead, and this attempt of a reboot is, again, starting with Superman. While Zack Snyder seemed to think that every superhero was Batman, James Gunn really understands Superman and the movie was pretty awesome. I'm really excited to see what comes next from the DCU, but their first plan was really bad, if it can be called a plan at all. Did you know that Universal created the first cinematic universe ever? The horror movies they made between the 30s and the 50s were very popular and are considered classics of the early cinema years, shaping our view of monsters and horror stories forever. Names like Frankenstein, Dracula, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, and The Phantom of the Opera are so well known to this day because of those films. So if you ever dressed up like one of those classic monsters in Halloween, you can thank Universal Studios. And in 1943, they did something no one had ever done before, a crossover with the characters from their films. They started the very first cinematic universe in history with the movie Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. But when horror movies started decaying in popularity and they were running out of ideas, Universal tried putting comedy actors to meet the monsters, which wasn't their best shot, so they abandoned the whole monster roster and moved on to other stuff. They had a few attempts on bringing them back, but the one that really landed was the remake of The Mummy in 1999. Naturally, they wanted a sequel right away, so we got The Mummy Returns in 2001, which was a big success as much as its predecessor. But this movie was considered to be kinda shallow, just one action sequence after the other without much of a story. In other words, not as good as the first one. And most people only remember it because of that PlayStation 1 looking Scorpion King. But it doesn't matter, because now Universal have money and really want their big plan to be a success, so they come up with Van Helsing in 2004. They put Wolverine against all kinds of creatures like werewolves, Frankenstein's monster, and even Dracula himself. And Universal really jumped the gun with this one. The movie barely came out and they already had ordered a sequel, a video game, an animated movie, and a TV show. Needless to say, that didn't happen. The video game and the anime exist, but the second movie and the TV show never left the pre-production limbo. With the catastrophe that was The Mummy 3, they fell into a chain reaction of the same proportions of the last years of the DCEU, trying desperately to land another successful remake for a few years. They released one bomb after the other. In 2014, they had already seen the first Avengers making $1 billion and some very strong entries such as Captain America 2 and Guardians of the Galaxy. Sick of goofing around, it was time to start a new big plan. Again. They put a pin in every monster remake project they had in development just so they could release them under the brand of their very own version of the MCU. Well, at least that was the idea. A Dracula movie was in development since 2007. Universal pressed pause on it when the budget started getting too big, retaking the production in 2012. So by 2014, it was almost ready to go. By the end of 2013, when they finished filming it, Universal took a good look at it and said, "Wow! This is horrible!" So they went through a lot of reshooting and changed some stuff from the original script, including changes in the cast and a new ending in the modern days that could lead to the so wanted connection among all of the next movies. Universal wanted to see the box office numbers before making any big decision, but they didn't hesitate in advertising it as part of their cinematic monster universe. And that's the story behind Dracula Untold, a film so below average that Universal denied with all their hearts that was ever part of the plan. So what the hell happened to the cinematic universe? They tried again, of course. Universal remembered what was the big success that brought the monster movies back to business: The Mummy. So they did another Mummy. But this time they had a few problems. First of all, they could not just recreate the same movie they did in 1999. It's 18 years later, the audience, the market, everything changed. But the biggest problem of this movie had name and face: Tom Cruise. His involvement in the production of the films he's in is often described as intense. He's a control freak, basically. And this new take on The Mummy got famous for this exact aspect. Tom Cruise wanted to take over the movie completely. He even commissioned a different version of the script, changing his character to something more comfortable for him, and why not, making his role in the story even bigger. The director of this movie, Alex Kurtzman, didn't have much of a portfolio. It was only the second feature film of his career and his first experience directing a movie with a budget over $20 million. And that created an opportunity for someone to take over and micromanage every little detail of the movie. And the results speak for itself, but the mess doesn't stop there. Even before the movie was released, the drama behind the scenes was already worldwide news, so they tried to cover it up by releasing a trailer for the movie, without any music or sound effects.
No!
Someone got fired that day. So Universal needed to do some damage control. They decided to officially announce their big plan: the Dark Universe. They showed everything: a logo, a music theme, and even a whole cast of stars as the main monsters. Along with Sofia Boutella as the Mummy and Tom Cruise, we had Javier Bardem as the Frankenstein's monster, Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man, and Russell Crowe as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They even did a photo shoot with all of them together. And by together, I mean photoshopped side by side, resulting in this abomination of a photo. What a weird picture. Why is Russell Crowe's hand like this? Looks like he was supposed to have a cane and they forgot to put it there. Rumor has it that Universal also wanted Channing Tatum as Van Helsing, The Rock to be Wolfman, and Angelina Jolie for The Bride of Frankenstein. They thought announcing all of that would make people want to watch The Mummy, but they forgot about a crucial detail: the movie sucks! They were so worried about establishing a franchise that they forgot to make the movie good. The result of all that is, their big plan crashed and burned after only one movie, and seems like they gave up on it for real this time. Just a tip for the brave people who will want to try something like this next. Remember the first rule of making a cinematic universe: Don't tell everyone you're making a cinematic universe. But not only movies suffer from the big plan problem. We have some examples of this situation in the TV scenario. The most recent one is among the biggest downfalls in television history, Stranger Things. I covered most of the production of this show in my video about the ending, so I'll try not to repeat myself, but the story was meant to be just one season, and the way it gradually got worse with the last season being as bad as it was, proves that they didn't have a clue what they were doing. And the documentary and the press tour after the finale were the final nails in the coffin. But they insist on saying the whole show was planned throughout the last 10 years. They so badly want us to believe they actually had a plan all along and every detail was a clue, but the results of their work shows the opposite. And they keep showing us they didn't plan at all. The script for the ending wasn't done while they were filming it, even though they had 3 years to do it. They contradict themselves a lot and answer the most simple questions in a way that conveys zero confidence, with stuff like "we didn't think about that," or starting the answers with "I guess." They really want to pretend they had a big plan for the show when it's clear and obvious they were just making stuff up on the fly. How I Met Your Mother kinda had the opposite problem. If you watch the show, you know how it ends, and most importantly, you know how the ending was received by the audience. CBS started the show with the intention of making it all about the relationship between Ted and Robin. The original plan was to go for it for a few seasons, create the whole drama we know about, they date, they broke up, and in the end the kids encouraged Ted to go after Robin. But the thing is, the way the story evolves takes everything in another direction. As the show got renewed for more and more seasons, obviously the story kept getting longer and they needed to keep things flowing. But the show created a problem that I think no one predicted. It was too well written. The character development for both Ted and Robin took them in completely different directions. The show was so good on making the audience believe and accept that Ted and Robin are better off being just friends that the two of them ending up as a couple stopped making sense altogether. But they couldn't change the ending because of the show's storytelling structure. They didn't know for how long the show would run, and the idea is that the whole series takes place in one single event, Ted telling his kids how he met their mother. Because of that, wouldn't make sense if the kid just grew up out of nowhere or kept growing up throughout the story that took maybe a few hours for Ted to tell. So they shot all of the scenes with the kids in 2005, locking in how the show would end in the first season, without realizing that they could change their minds about it in the future. So the show locked itself in a big plan that needed to be changed, but they stuck with it and ended up being on everyone's list of the worst TV show endings of all time. In my opinion, that was very easy to solve. They could have just shot a bunch of scenes with the kids to use as different options for possible endings and figure it out as the show went by, or just scrap the ending they wanted to do initially and finish the show as soon as Ted meets the mother. But they didn't, so it is what it is. There is one more TV show I wanted to talk about because it's a very interesting case of a big plan backfiring. The show in question is Pretty Little Liars. This one needs no introduction, but just for context, Pretty Little Liars is a thriller teen drama about a group of girls that have to investigate and try to find a mysterious stalker that started threatening them and leave weird messages 1 year after their best friend went missing. And this stalker only signs as A. It was a massive success. It's probably the most popular show of the 2010s, and most of its success can be attributed to one thing: the mystery. The show is built in a way that is designed to be addictive. The entire runtime of the show is about creating questions for you to want answers. We don't know who the hell is A, so everyone is a suspect, and the script takes advantage of cliffhangers and plot twists to keep everyone engaged. And it worked super well. There's also a bit of luck in the mix, cause the show came out almost perfectly aligned with the initial era of social media. With the explosion of social media and the internet in general in the early 2010s, Pretty Little Liars got even more buzz because everyone who watched the show wanted to discuss and create theories about it with other people online, and the people who didn't watch the show wanted to be up to date in the conversation, so the show got a lot of attention based on FOMO. A mystery story is perfect for this kind of scenario. You create a conversation about what kinds of things are clues, and it feels like a big friend gathering to crack a case. And if this is a friend gathering, the host is Marlene King. Marlene King was the showrunner of PLL, and most importantly, she was a very active member of the community online. She took advantage of the noise the show was making on social media and decided to address the audience directly, telling people to pay attention to all details, that everything was a clue, and that created the feeling that the answer for the mystery was right there all along. That works simply because that's the best part of a mystery story, the misleading details that you only notice after knowing the conclusion. So when the story is over, you have that feeling of surprise, thinking of how you didn't notice all of that before, or even better, when you're able to figure it out on your own, and when the story ends, you can say, "I knew it!" And Pretty Little Liars looked a lot like this. The way the story was told and the interaction of the showrunner with the audience online led everyone to believe they had a big plan in motion throughout the whole show, and they were developing a mystery that would blow everyone's minds in the end. I can only imagine how it felt when the ending was released and the big reveal was out. You know who's the big villain of Pretty Little Liars? Well, the plan was to make one of the 4 main girls to be the big bad. That was quite obvious and honestly isn't even that much of a genius idea. But like I mentioned, the beauty of it is not the plot twist itself, but the hidden clues, the feeling that you could have figured it out if you just paid enough attention to the right details. But here's the problem. Marlene King had her very strong presence online, inciting the audience to become detectives and don't let anything go unnoticed. But at the same time, she didn't want anyone figuring her story out. The fans got pretty good at creating theories and most of them made sense and actually solved all the mysteries, but she wanted the final reveal to be a big plot twist that no one could ever have predicted. However, she had already given the public so many leads and clues that every single possible option for a resolution to the mystery was already on the table. There was no way she could pull off an ending that was surprising for everybody. The big villain of Pretty Little Liars is one of the main character's evil twin. The only option left was a person that was never mentioned, showed, or established whatsoever. Marlene really wanted to be seen as the mastermind behind the genius storytelling. She wanted to outsmart the audience so badly that she was willing to throw away any sense of logic and go for the most nonsensical ending. And that's how her big plan backfired. She was more concerned with making herself look smarter than her public than with actually telling a good story. Having a big plan sounds very epic, and Marvel really made clear to everyone that when you actually have a good plan, it is something really great that gets the audience's attention. And on top of that, if you take a look at the top 20 biggest grossing movies of all time, you'll see all 4 Avengers movies in there, with Endgame in 2nd place, Spider-Man No Way Home in 8th, the Avatar movies are all there, Fast and Furious, Jurassic World, Star Wars. Fact is, franchises make money. A lot of it. But when done wrong, we have studios more interested in establishing a franchise rather than making the movies actually work. Sometimes they stick with the plan even when it's clear that it needs to change, and sometimes they change it last minute just to try and get everyone by surprise just for some cheap shock value. This only leaves us with this weird feeling that everything has to be connected and a story can't just be a story anymore.